Trimming a wheel-thrown piece has a big learning curve for a beginner. There are many things to keep in mind. My students often struggle with trying to remember all of those things at the same time. Things like locking your hands together and holding your tool, and then locking your tool to your hand will help a tremendous amount when you are trying to trim a nice centered foot. As my students are working, I always stress to them that their hands should be locked together. The tool should be touched by both hands to keep it stable so they can always cut their foot nice and even. Also, the big tip is to cut straight down from the top of the pot, or I should say from the bottom, straight down on the bottom. Cut the outside of the foot. Once that is trimmed up, then straight down on the inside to cut the inside of the foot. The pot has to be centered in order to do this. Now, despite that, my students struggle sometimes, and they might forget one of those things, and they might end up by messing up their foot completely, like cutting through it, cutting it off, or cutting it terribly off center. So in the case of something like this, I can show you some different options that we could do to help correct a foot. This is not the best alternative. It's much better to cut it right, maybe just restart and cut it right. But sometimes my kids are in a jam. I only have them for a semester, and they need to get these things done, and they have a limited amount of time in class. So this video is to help them. Hopefully you'll find it helpful too. Now, depending on how badly the foot is damaged, there are a couple different things you can do. This one is too far gone to do what I'm going to show here, but I'll at least explain it so you can kind of see. Occasionally what I might do is I might make a notched foot, but this one doesn't quite have enough left over, so it's not going to be evenly spaced. A notched foot would be something like I would do on, say, a colander where I want the water to drain out. And again, this one doesn't quite have enough clay left on the foot to do this evenly. So I'm not going to do this for real on this. But a notched foot, you would divide or space out your notches of where your feet would be, and then you just trim away the excess. Again, a perfect example of when I would do this on purpose would be, say, with a colander when I want the water to drain out of the bottom and not sit underneath it. So a notched foot allows you to have feet. But again, I cut away too much on this, so I didn't have enough room for a notched foot. So what I'm going to show on this is the method. Again, this is not a recommended method. This is not a great way to do it, but this is just for when my kids are in a jam. By the way, I should mention I am using a sticky bat sort of a thing. I will put a link to this in the video description. The Creative Industries, I'm not too sure if this is by them, but they have a sticky bat. I have some other videos on using a sticky bat. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm just removing the offending foot. So I'm just trimming that all away. I kind of hand sculpted some of it, and then I'm going to trim it away until I've rounded it. Now, notice I didn't cut the bottom any lower because the bottom was already cut to the correct depth. Remember that you want to have the walls of the pot and the floor of the pot all about the same thickness and the same thickness as the foot. So I'm using the same angle change that I had used before to place my foot there. And now I'm going to score this. And I'm just going to grab another tool that I can score with. Okay, I could have used a needle tool, but I don't quite have enough patience for doing a needle tool all the way around. I'm going to score where I made the lines for the foot. Now the lines are helpful and making sure that I'm getting the foot placed right in the center where I want it to be. Okay. Now I have rolled a coil, and the coil is perhaps just a little bit thicker than the foot that I would have trimmed. This will give me a little excess clay. And the coil, by the way, this is on the stiff side of plastic. It's not quite leather hard, but it's not super plastic because I don't want to add a clay that is really, really wet to this. I want it to be a little bit closer and comparable in moisture. So now I'm just adding a little bit of slip or water. This is my throwing water, so it's much slippier than just regular water. And then I'm going to place my coil on there, and as it comes around, I'm going to cut those ends and score and slip the ends as well. So we've got basically a little bit of hand building combined with the wheel throwing here. Then I'm going to blend the interior and the exterior of the foot ring. And I am holding the coil in place as I'm blending this to make sure that I'm not pushing it off and out of place. So now I'm just smoothing this with a wood tool. Now with a little bit of water, I'm just going to compress and kind of shape this foot a little bit. And if you really needed to trim it, you could trim it a little bit more with a trim tool. There we go. And that is how you can transform a messed up foot into something that's usable. Now this foot is a little bit softer, so I will place it on its rim until it gets a little bit stiffer, and I can turn it over and put it on its bottom. Another possibility that I wanted to show, like if you didn't want to necessarily do a foot ring, is we could do some legs as an option. So again, I'm just trimming this away fully to get rid of all the evidence of the messed up foot. But again, I'm not really trimming any more in the bottom of it because that was already to the right depth. So I just trim that away so it is domed. Then I'm adding a little bit of water because when I rib this, I want to make sure that I'm compressing down the grog. I really managed to get a scratchy grog surface there, so a little bit of water and ribbing it will help that. And then let's make some legs for it. Okay, so now that I have my bowl trimmed, I'm going to make 3 little legs that I can use, and I'm going to start off with 3 pieces of clay that are approximately the same size. Now, I'm using 3 because whenever you have 3 of something, it will sit flat. If you use more than 3, if you use 4 or more, you have to really pay attention to making sure that you will not have an unlevel piece. So it's a little bit easier with 3. So this is just one of many, many ways to make legs. I am going to make them, store them on it, and then when they become the same moisture as the pot, then I will attach. This one is a little bit drier than the first one that I did. Okay, so I have it, I don't know, it looks like a leech or something. That's kind of weird, I know, but I have it kind of tapered. I'm going to take one end and kind of pinch it around on itself so it's going to curl, and then I'm going to flatten it so it will look something like that. So I'm going to do that again, curl it around on itself, and then flatten it. Okay, so that will look approximately like that. And I'm just going to position them about where the foot ring would normally go and trying to make sure that they're spaced evenly. And again, I'm just going to let that sit on there, and then I'll come back in there and I will attach them when they become the same moisture. Okay, this has been sitting and the moisture has pretty much evened out. Now I'm just going to just give myself a little outline of where the legs are going to be sitting, and I'll use those reference marks in order to score. Now I'm adding a little bit of slip or just water will suffice. I want to make sure that it's sitting level. And now I'm just going to really tidy up the score marks, make sure that it's very, very secured, using slip to make sure that the seam is secured. And then if you want to, you could do the optional step if you wanted to really blend it with like a wood tool, go back in there and re-sculpt it so it looks sharp and defined again. Alrighty, hopefully you found this somewhat helpful on how to salvage a botched trimmed foot on the wheel. I start off by showing the notched foot like I would use in a colander. I showed how you could completely dome it round, add a coil and create a foot, or completely do it round and add legs. So hopefully that's helpful. Please subscribe if you'd like some more videos on working with clay.